Welcome to the Common Geeking Program. We are a book club podcast where each week, three of us will read up on a topic and then discuss it from our own gurky. From our own combination girdles? Of geeky and nerdy, which were the two words that I was meaning to say. Perspectives.
Neeky, personally.
But. Yeah, Neeky? No, gurky is much better than neeky.
Neeky sounds illicit.
No, but it would just be needy, because I said gurky. You know, it's changing so needy and gurky is
whoever's editing, please put in the clip of JD and Scrubs saying,
if you call Carla Pickle, then I can call Isabella Little Gherkin.
Please, I need this.
All right, this week I am your host. My name is Jeff Leavitt, and we will be discussing, we're going to be talking about Transformers.
Again.
But as a toy line this time, and what I had them watch was season 2, episode 2, I believe, of the Netflix documentary series The Toys That Made Us, which was about Transformers, as one might expect. And our theme this week is going to be successful franchises that were spawned from basically toy lines. So the toys came first, and then they spawned successful media franchises that are liked for their own characters, their own story, not just the toys that they're connected to. And this week, I'm joined by two people, each of whom has selected a domain that they think connects to our topic and theme. And they are...
Hello, my name's Pat, and I'm going to be talking about the wonderful world... Wow, I didn't say wonderful correctly, but whatever.
The wonderful world, dude.
The wonderful world of Legos.
The wonderful world of Legos.
Yeah, I'm talking about Lego. It's the dopest toy of all time.
Oh, I thought you were talking about waffles.
So, yeah.
On a similar note, I am Colin Ketchen, and will be representing a specific Lego toy line known as Bionicle.
And,
did that sound natural enough for you?
Yeah, it sounds perfectly natural.
Cool.
And
I love talking
the
about
reason that I'm letting them
Bionicle.
both rep Legos, because Bionicle is different enough, and I think, Pat, you were going to focus specifically on Lego turning into the Lego movie franchise, right?
I was talking about the games, but...
Oh, okay. Sure. Either way.
Yeah.
I feel like...
I like it.
Yeah, well, we'll touch on things, because I feel like that might also have to do with...
I've always wanted to hear you say those words to me.
The franchises that they're, like, Star Wars and Marvel.
Yeah, that's true, but they also had, like, their own games, like this racing game that they made in the early 2000s.
Oh, I didn't
Holy
know that.
shit! Guys,
What?
are we in Pat's domain already? What happened?
Fuck off.
Oh
I'm just curious. Okay, you know what?
I was just saying that I have reason to fucking rep
We're
this,
just
bitch,
having a
all
natural
right?
conversation, Colin. All
Why
right.
don't you heck
I
off?
sound so natural. What are you talking about?
All right.
Bionicle.
Bionicle.
So we're going to start by summarizing our topic and domains before we openly discuss. And then finally, we're going to kick it off. Well, kick it off is really the starting thing. So we're going to kick it on with a rating section to determine which of these fellows best contributed and whether or not they enjoyed our topic today. So I think without further ado, let's move it on over to the summary. All right, folks, let's get started with this here summary. Okay, all right, this is going to be a tricky one. All right, we're talking about the Transformers, and I guess we'll start off with a little bit of how the franchise started, the toy franchise, and then the show off of that. So, Transformers was originally, before it was Transformers, was kind of a couple different toy lines in Japan, the Diaclone line and the Microchange line most notably. And there's some story behind how those started with economic things and partnerships with the U.S., working off of G.I. Joe, et cetera, but we don't need to get into that too much.
Yeah, that was a fun irony that they pointed out in the Toys That Made Us episode.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot a joke I was going to make. Oh, well.
Oh, I'm so sorry. G.I. Joke? No,
yeah, G.I. Joe. No, I was gonna start off the fucking intro by being like, oh, today we're talking about an Autobots. No, yeah.
Oh,
but I didn't
Yeah.
do it. So
the presentation of the toys that made us talking about Diaclone and what Microchange, or it was Microman and then it turned into Microchange.
Yes, it was
like
Microman.
these two parallel lines of transforming toys in Japan that evolved from G.I. Joe, which was licensed to them from Hasbro, right?
Yeah, I don't think Diaclone was derivative of G.I. Joe. I think that the Microman and Microchange line was.
Mm-hmm.
So, so, I mean, since we're talking about it, I guess we'll talk about it. Like, the thing was, like, that Japan imported G.I. Joe over there, and the kind of war themes weren't really selling very well, so they decided to take the molds of the toys and basically make them translucent and give them metallic parts on the inside so you could see the mechanisms of how the G.I. Joe action figure actually fit together, and then they turned them into robot toys, which started the Microman line. So they had this emphasis on being able to like take them apart and replace them with different items, give them different things. And that ended up becoming too expensive when the economy started doing poorly. So then they changed that into...
I think it was Microchange, because then they took those like interchangeable part toys and they just shrunk them. They made them very small, right?
No, I think it was... No, I think that it was something else before it was Microman. And then Microman was when they made it smaller. I don't remember what it was first.
Yeah, okay.
Let me Google it.
It doesn't matter so much, but...
yeah.
So basically, then they started making these smaller figures, and then they made, like, with the Diaclone line and with the Microchange line, they started making these small transforming figures, and Diaclone was, like, I guess, bigger transforming figures, but they had little tiny pilots that went with them.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, no, and so the Microchange line and the Diaclone line are largely what all of the original Transformers toys came from. Okay,
yeah,
so
because it was like, wasn't it people from Hasbro? They just went to Japan to see what can we buy and sell again.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much. Appropriation, fun stuff. All right. But I mean, like, it was appropriated from G.I. Joe to begin with, which was probably, you know, it goes back and forth
a lot. Is it
a
appropriation when it's, like, for a commercial purpose?
Yeah, I think that might just be...
I feel like it's just copyright infringement or some shit like that.
Well, they made a deal. They didn't just steal the shit.
Yeah.
But the specific thing about this is the Transformers story was completely original.
Correct. Yeah. So basically, once they brought the figures from the Microchange line and the Diaclone line over to the United States, then to market it to an American audience, Hasbro felt they needed to write a story that went along with it. Through some trial and error of like finding the right story, the what's his name? Jim something.
It was like Jim
Shooter
and
Jim Shooter.
Bob.
Yeah, Bob
Shooter,
Dianetics is the guy who wrote all the characters. Jim Shooter is the one who came up with the concept,
Decepticon.
The Autobots and the Decepticons. They're on the planet Cybertron. They're warring over resources, and they go to Earth for more resources. That's the general concept of the Transformers. And then
General concept.
But they crash into a volcano.
Yeah,
and then they freeze in the hot volcano.
Oh yeah. Also,
I mean, in the show, it was that the crash caused them to go offline, and they were put into stasis. So they weren't frozen; they were dismantled, and then the eruption of the volcano triggered one of their systems. And no, it didn't energize. It triggered one of their systems, and then the ship started repairing them. So it was like
you're speaking to somebody who has only seen the first 3 Michael Bay films, and I'm going to need you to talk dumb to me,
which is why I'm explaining it to you.
Yeah, they were frozen in that one. I'll give you that. But also, do we know if Jim Shooter was a Scientologist? Because that kind of sounds like the Scientology story.
It sounds like Xanu.
I really don't think so. I had a theory a while ago that
Autobots,
the historical thing was probably based at least a little bit on the eruption of Mount St. Helen, which was in the early 80s. Because like then the volcano that they were in was called Mount St. Hilary, and then the eruption is what, like, I don't know, unsubstantiated, but that was something that I noticed a while ago.
Yeah, they probably just like saw the parallels there and were like, we can make this relevant.
Yeah, exactly, right. So then, basically, the Jim Shooter employed Bob Budiansky, who was I guess he was
Yeah, Pat.
Oh, what, Jim Shooter? Is that the joke with the gun?
You said shooter, and Pat and I both went pew pew.
Oh, okay. Anyway, he employed Bob Budiansky to basically write all of the character bios for the original 26 Transformers, which I'm a little sad they didn't list.
Yeah, I kind of expected a little bit. I think that's a complaint I had frequently throughout this, is watching the show kind of felt like a Wikipedia article. And I don't mean that derogatorily, but it chose to present things in a more engaging way, and maybe not in like a rigorous investigative way that I might prefer out of a docuseries. And that might just be a me thing. It is a very engaging, comically toned
that's fair.
show.
I guess it's something that they're assuming that a lot of people don't know a lot about to begin with.
Yeah,
like watching this,
that's
a
true.
lot of that information was new to me, and a lot of it wasn't. I knew a lot of this information. You know, I knew who Bob Budiansky was. I knew that a lot of the toys were derived from Diaclone and Microchange. So yeah, like Microchange was
just,
a lot of
that
the
stuff that you know casually.
Well, no, I knew that because I'm a fan of Transformers, is what I'm saying. You know,
I had a question about the series. Was it
Yeah, go
made for Netflix, or is it on like actual TV?
no, it's made for Netflix. It was a Netflix original, I think.
I'm just confused as to why they didn't go for like a full hour. I'm pretty sure the episode was only like 46.
Yeah, they're 46 minutes, which is like fine, but yeah, typically...
Yeah, but they could have used that 14 minutes to do something investigative or something.
I mean, you have to consider the pace. I mean, the show didn't drag on, but it definitely felt like a complete arc in terms of what they were telling. I can see them not wanting to bloat that.
Yeah, no, I think that the way that they were doing it was meant to kind of take the historical facts and tell it as a story, basically.
Yeah.
You know,
for sure.
Like the way that it progressed throughout time. So perhaps some of that stuff bogged it down, some of the finer details, and you know, I don't think that it would have been nice for me to hear, but
yeah, no, I think I agree with you.
It would have been really necessary for them to list the names of the first 26 or. Like,
I think I would have liked that too, but that is, I think it takes a while for the show to get to that point in like, hey, these are what the Transformers are, because there is such a complicated history to it. But I
want to say I could probably figure out what they were, but just based on who's in the first episode.
Well, I'll tell you what, they didn't do it. Why don't we make the next 10 minutes of our podcast listing?
Okay, it's Optimus Prime, Megatron, Starscream, Soundwave, Jazz, Ironhide, Ratchet, Gears.
Holy shit.
Oh boy. Did I say Jazz already?
Yes, you did.
Yes.
Okay, Thundercracker, Skywarp, Reflector, Bumblebee, no shit. All right, Cliffjumper, Mirage, Hound, Trailbreaker.
Oh my god.
Sideswipe, Sunstreaker. Where am I at right now? Is this...
You're at 18.
18?
This is impressive. Why are you guys not impressed when I do this with Star Trek?
Because Star Trek's dumb.
You're right. Star Trek is a lot more dumbed down and definitely doesn't have as much heady stuff as the world of the Transformers.
Yeah, I was a big fan of that Star Trek Beast Wars.
Rumble. I don't know if they count. Laserbeak, Ravage. That's 21.
Mm-hmm.
I'm only missing 5.
Did you say Megatron?
Yeah, I said Megatron.
Okay, cool. I was about to say, if you miss Megatron, that'd be funny.
I'm just looking around on my shelf right now, honestly. It's got to be some weird, obscure Autobots. There's a lot of... Brawn. Was
Grimlock in the original?
No, he wasn't. He was the second year of the
right. They were saying
Transformers.
that Grimlock was like a redesign of a few other toys that they incorporated.
Grimlock and the Dinobots were all Diaclone figures, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, well, I think that was pretty good. I'm only missing, 4?
You're missing 4. Jeff, that was impressive. Like, props.
Thank you.
That was
better
than I expected.
Oh, Shockwave. That's definitely got to be one.
Autobots. Jeff's
I'm only
shelf.
missing 3. All right. Okay. Cool. Probably that didn't need to happen, but it did. So that's where we're at.
Story of this podcast.
Okay. So then, that's the general gist. Is that once the story came up, I guess the other big thing to mention was 6 months before the release of Transformers,
GoBots
aired. Which was a competitor with Hasbro, Tonka, working with a competitor of Takara, which was the Japanese company working with Hasbro to make the Transformers, Bandai. who made the GoBots line. And so for a while, they were kind of neck and neck because the Transformers figures were a bit more complicated and interesting, and the GoBots figures were a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
But I think...
No, that was kind of cool. I never understood the contention between the two.
A big part of... Like, they were cheaper, so the toys tended to break a little bit more. But I think also a big part of it was the fact that the storyline of the Transformers show had a bit more depth than the story of the GoBot show, which is a little bit ironic considering how much depth the Transformers series has compared to things today, because it's like a cheesy 80s cartoon. But
even so, that's what I'm excited to talk about in the discussion. I think that like... I really like learning that foundation, but seeing the transfer from that foundation to like the movies and the TV shows that I'm familiar with, I think that's what grabbed me about the episode. So I am excited to do some compare and contrast.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of sort of ups and downs with the franchise, places where they thought that it was kind of going under, and then there were and then after the premiere of the original show, there was like a lot of sort of innovations made to the series that were not always received well at the time, but then kind of made their place. Like Beast Wars when Beast Wars was first announced, people were like, no, we want cars and trucks. That's what Transformers are. Fuck these animals. And then it ended up being a great hit, especially because the show was incredible for the time. And I still like watching it despite the shitty ass animation, which was, again, really good for the time. But yeah, Pat, you know what? I've just got to get you to watch Beast Wars sometimes.
Nope.
And, I mean, we can touch on other things like some of the other evolutions later and like, you know, the big thing of the movie and like killing Optimus Prime, spoiler alert. And that, not the newer movies, but the 1986 movie. But I mean,
did they not kill him in a new one?
I mean, they do, but that's not what I was talking about.
Jeff, this is serendipity. A wonderful moment happened, and I want the editor to point it out because you stuttered a bit. And instead of the newer movies, you said the manure movies.
Manure.
And I think if that doesn't sum up your position.
Yeah, it was a Freudian slip about the Michael Bay movies being total cow shit.
I like the first one.
I like the first one better than the other ones. But even in retrospect, I don't like the first one. I think I would like the first one a lot more if it weren't for the existence of the character Sam Witwicky. He's just so incredibly unlikable, even in the first movie. I think that Optimus Prime was done really well in the first movie, whereas the other ones, he turned into a fucking rage monster, which... We will kill them all. Must have been real fucking awkward for Peter Cullen to voice.
We need a truce. All I want is to be back in charge. Besides, who would you be without me, Prime? Time to find out.
That's like my favorite bit in the episode, though, is the bit where Peter Cullen
talking about Optimus's death in the film.
Well, I was going to say his inspiration from his brother, who was cool. A war hero who died, and that's who he based the persona of Optimus Prime on, and that was, like, really touching in a sort of unexpected way.
Optimus, all I ever wanted was the survival of our race. You must see why I had to betray you. You didn't betray me. You betrayed yourself. No, Optimus!
And I didn't really know that before watching this.
Well, didn't he develop the voice? No, his brother said, like, hey, don't be that kind of hero. Be a real hero. And then, like, he said that on Peter's way to the recording studio. I think he was alive when he recorded Optimus.
Again, there is, you know, more going on into the future and into the present, but I think that gives us a good foundation to start talking about, like, how this toy series, which was started first and foremost as a toy series, and then another toy series, and then a third toy series, and then was an imported toy series, then added this cartoon on it, which made it a successful franchise.
I just like the idea that somewhere deep inside Optimus Prime is a little G.I. Joe.
Yeah, for sure. Oh God, we need a Transformer who turns into a Segway. That's what we really need.
When he turns back into the normal dude, he's just a tour guide.
Perfect. All right, guys, we're going to be moving on to the domains now, where our representatives get to summarize what they have brought to the figurative table today. Pat, why don't you fucking tell me about them bricks? There's actually an episode of this series that's about Legos.
Yes, there is, and it's exactly after the Transformers one, and I watched it.
Did you?
What's up? Yeah.
Good job.
Hey, Pat, do you know which episode comes before the Transformers episode?
The dumbass Star Trek one.
Eat a fucking dick.
That's actually a great fucking episode, and I would love to talk about that episode at length with you guys in a different context.
I would like to never talk about nor acknowledge the existence of said episode. So instead, I'm going to talk about my domain.
You won the gold star on our Star Trek special, you twat.
It was so funny. It was amazing.
All right, Patty Cakes, tell me about these Legos.
So Lego is a company that originally started out as just like a regular old toy company after this dude's carpentry business failed. It was in the Great Depression.
What country was it in again?
It's in Denmark, I believe.
Denmark, right.
I was hoping you were going to say it was Danish, and I just finished a season of Great British Baking Show, so I was ready for you to say Danish, but it didn't happen.
It is a Danish company. There you go, bud.
What kind of filling? Oh, you don't feel it Danish. Fuck! All right, cool. Moving on.
All right.
Don't you?
You don't
need
have to.
Go ahead.
Anyway,
we're not talking about pastries.
This guy,
Let's talk about
right,
Legos.
Old Kirk Christensen. If you can find a more like Nordic name, let me know. Besides Leif Erikson, obviously. But
Jarl Bolgruf of Whiterun.
He began his toy company with wooden things because during the Great Depression, metal was very scarce. But then he eventually realized that he could make toys a lot faster if you switched to plastic. There were already these bricks called what's it called? Something self-adhering,
it was something really stupid
okay?
like that.
It was very not marketable. And
it was like it was like stackable, removable bricks or some nonsense like that. Yeah.
These bricks, when stacked, would often fall over if they got too tall because they just had the signature Lego tops with the little pegs, but underneath it was hollow. So there was nothing there to really give them any rigidity. So Lego
story of my
was
life.
Not the first to make these bricks, but they were the first to patent the tubes underneath the bricks. Which allowed them to stack them and click them together and make vast creations that were actually just could stand the test of time because
is that the term you want to use to describe a Lego MOC?
Yeah,
a lot of gravitas. I like it.
Standing the test of time.
Yeah.
Well, I mean
more than almost anything. They're using like pretty much the same molds they were making like 40 years ago.
All they do
everything else has evolved and has been.
See, that makes more sense to me. I just got the image that 5-year-old Pat built like a little house out of Lego and was like, "This is going to stand the test of time." And it did.
No, I did not mean that. I just meant as a whole, the company stood the test of time with these bricks. So
sure did.
They filed that patent, effectively monopolizing the market on these bricks because theirs were the best bricks, the only bricks anybody ever wanted. They started to make different kits out of them.
Still true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though the patent ran out and the other companies get to use it.
80s, yeah.
Yeah.
So they started making different sets with them, like space-themed ones and castle-themed ones, but they really tried to stay away from weapons because when the company as a whole was starting, it was when Germany was invading their country. So they felt pretty bad about precipitating the sense of war being okay to young children. So they made a lot of their markets like based on ambulances and things like that. But then eventually they started to license the bricks to movies and make sets out of those. And a lot of movies, they're just like inherently weapons in them. So they were like, maybe we shouldn't market these towards kids, but hey, we could make a bunch of money off of marketing or licensing the Lego brand to Star Wars when they started making the original
I like the idea of
trilogy.
an adult section in a Lego store with like a curtain, and then behind it is just...
You just have a fucking AK-47 made out of Legos back there.
And it shoots like 1x5 stacks of studs.
So, okay, that I just want to cut you off a little bit just because we don't have to go through the entire narrative arc of how Lego got from A to B, but thank you for bringing us to how Lego became successful. Now, let's shift it over to a little bit like what we're talking about for this episode.
Well, that brings me to the next part, which was once they started doing that, they realized that kids were more into like the video game side of things instead of just making things for movies in real life. So their answer to that was to make, later on it was to make video games, but originally it was to make a robotics line, which was actually very interesting, and adults kind of gravitated towards it because they could make their own.
Mindstorms was dope.
Yeah. They could make their own like programming languages and everything, and it really didn't work in the way they intended, but it gave Lego a lot of success. So eventually they decided to actually just jump into video games. I remember way back in the early 2000s or the late 90s, I can't remember, when I was a kid, they had a video game that was essentially Mario Kart, but with Legos. You build your own carts and you just, I think it was called Lego Island or something like that.
I think I had that one. No, I had Lego Creator. Never mind.
So they started making actual video games revolving around playing with Legos, and they realized, like, yeah, kids like this, but it's not as cool as it could be. And then they started making...
And then Notch made Minecraft.
They started making their own video games licensed after movies and after shows and after comics, and that was really what ended up catching the interest of kids, but... They still put little elements of Lego in there, like you'd have to find hidden bricks, and
yeah. No, there's a lot of fun with the, like, even though the Lego games are based on like other franchises, I think that the format of them with like the whole building quality of it is very like important to what makes those games successful. Yeah. Like Lego Star Wars, I don't think would be successful if it were that same basic premise, but just Star Wars without the like the Lego is super important.
Like some level designs will actually make you find bricks and build up parts of the story in front of you,
right?
So that you can advance it. But it's also kind of brings me towards another point. Obviously, kids like those because they like the superheroes, they like the stories, and like playing video games mindlessly. But adults also find a lot of value in the video games because they kind of emulate what real-life Legos are to adults, too, which are almost collectible at this point. Me, as an adult, I like building kits that are pre-made because I'm not very creative, but it's cool to see, like, I built a Saturn V rocket kit. They have White House and, like, cool real-life things that you can build. They have space stations. They have all these cool kits to emulate real life, and in the game, they put a large emphasis on, if you want to beat this game 100%, you have to collect all these bits. You have to collect the golden bricks. You have to...
Give me the bits.
Do random things in the game to get all... Oh my god. To get all of those things, and it really kind of makes it so Legos, or Lego video games, rather, can span the interest of pretty much any age group. And they also made it cooperative, which is cool. So, like, parents can play with their kids, or kids can play with other kids, or adults can play with other adults. It's like whatever you want.
Yeah, word. All right. Okay.
Lego's
thank you,
sick.
Patty Cakes, for that talk about Legos.
Got you, fam. Alrighty, Colin, my boy. Let's hear about some more Legos, but more specific. Tell me about fucking Bionicle. I love the shit out of Bionicle. I really do.
So I might have some points against me for gold star contention because I did not select this domain, but I'm prepared to rep the shit out of it because, boy, I'm not just going to talk about Lego. I'm not going to talk about Bionicle. I have the 2015 Pohatu right here in my hand. And I'm you hear that? You hear that clinking? You hear that clinking, audience? You hear that? That sounds great, right? So I have that. I have the 2015 Tahoe and the 2016 Tahoe mixed up with a little person. Now,
those are even the fun ones. Those are the ones.
So these ones are actually pretty fun.
Stick into the system, and Bionicle fucking broke their system.
So let's talk about how it did that. So Lego, as Pat has said, found a lot of success in tying things to other franchises. One of the big things about Lego is that around the late 80s, early 90s, Lego was facing a bit of a financial crisis, probably partly due to the patent expiration and things like Mega Block flooding the scene. But they were hitting a lot. They were not hitting their sales marks. And they said, we need a story. And this is where this lines up with the Transformers thing so perfectly. They said, we have a product, we need a story to market it to Americans. And Lego said the same thing. So instead of making up their own story, they said, let's get Star Wars. And everyone was like, cool. And they made a bunch of Star Wars toys that sold phenomenally well. The issue being the licenses and the royalties that they had to pay to Lucasfilm kind of made it a bit of a wash that didn't really dig them out of anything.
There was also the big issue that they didn't make enough in the first year when the movie actually came out. And then by the time they made enough in the second year, kids just weren't interested.
Yeah,
that's pretty fair.
There was a lot of stories like that about like Lego just arriving a little bit late to the game that would have made them a lot of money.
So what Bionicle ended up doing was making an original story. So the concept of Bionicle, it does not use bricks the way that typical Lego does. It used an evolving and at that point new set of pieces called Lego Technic, which are based around ball and socket joints and things that correct with axles and cylinders. So Bionicle as a toy line were essentially action figures where each section, each arm, each shoulder socket, and the body, they're all different components, and they get clicked together and torn apart just like regular Lego pieces, but it had a very rich, deep backstory that I used to know a ton about. But basically every 6 months they would come out with like 6 heroes, and then they would come out with 6 villains, and then the next year they would have a new set. And the story was set on an island, and the first figures that you could buy were called the Toa Mata.
Yeah, a lot of the lore of Bionicles was very, very based on
I think it was
Polynesian and Hawaiian.
Polynesian, yeah.
Polynesian. I was gonna say, God, what's the term for that general area? There's a term. I just had it on the tip of my tongue.
Oceania?
The Pacific?
No, but there's like it's 2 words.
You look that up. So there was actually
Pacific
an issue
Islander?
So
yes, Pacific Islander.
Fantastic.
Yes. It was based on a lot of Pacific Islander lore.
So Bionicle found a lot of immediate success. And speaking as someone who was into Bionicle from 2001, I was 7 years old when I got my first one. It was Pohatu, the brown one.
Same. Pohatu was my favorite.
Pohatu was a badass. Where the names of the original 6 were Tahu, he was the Toa of fire. Gali was of water. Lua was air. Pohatu was stone. Onua was earth, and Kopaka was ice. And the whole mythos was centered around these elements, and each year you'd get a new hero for those elements, or a new version of that hero for those elements. And from a superficial standpoint, it was really easy to latch on to, like, I like this color or this style. But from a story standpoint, you could know, well, this means they come from this part of the island. Or I know the Taraga that they are related to, and I know what role they play in this battle. And the story of Bionicle got pretty deep. They had I've seen the first 3 of the 4 movies that they made. It was originally planned to go for 20 years. They canceled it after about 10. It went from 2001 to 2010. And then in 2015 and 16, they revived it with a simpler story, but they didn't sell very well, so they canceled it again. But Bionicle was a success to the point where it's considered one of the things responsible for helping Lego dig out of its financial crisis. And around the time that Bionicle was fading is when, as Pat was saying, the video games sort of came into play. But I read a lot of the Bionicle books. In 2005, I bought every single set that came out, and I was so freaking proud of that. I had a dresser with 4 drawers full of Bionicle pieces. MOC, the act of make your own creation, was like my favorite thing to do. But in terms of talking about how toys become successful franchises, the unique thing about Bionicle is it was designed to be a franchise. They didn't release a toy and say, "Oh shit, we gotta go make extra stuff." The plan was we need to dig out of this. We need a franchise. The plan was make these movies, make it last 20 years, write these books, develop the lore.
But it was partnered with in that way. It was partnered with the toys coming out. Like, they didn't want to make the franchise and then make toys out of it. They're like, we need to make a toy that has a franchise. So
Correct.
It did come from the toy first perspective, where the only reason they were doing it was because they wanted to sell toys. Right?
Yeah, and it's still toy first, but the whole idea was to make a multimedia franchise. And for about a decade, they succeeded. And I think that anybody who grew up with them can speak to the fun of mixing and matching the arms or trying the different masks on. The fact that their lights were their eyes were transparent, and just like all these little touches and flourishes that were great. And then when you see those translated into a movie or a book or a comic, because all the toys came with little comics inside of them, it was so cool to piece those stories together the same way you would a Lego set. It was a different approach compared to these other 2 things, but I think that, at least for me, it had the most profound impact.
right, guys, with that their topic and those their domains summarized, let's move on to the discussion portion of this podcast.
What is it that we do in this portion of the podcast?
We're gonna fucking talk about some shit. Just fucking lay down the lines. We're gonna talk about the things that we've been itching to talk about this entire time.
I was really hoping that you would just say discuss. I forget who I was with on another episode, but they were like, this is the discussion where we discuss.
I mean,
And
I
was
think
like,
that joke's been made a number of times.
I was just, oh my goodness gravy. All right.
So, looking at it from the outside, I think that there's kind of a negative connotation that people usually have. Is like, if you say, oh, this thing is made just to sell toys, it seems a little bit dirtier, right? Like, oh, this is just some corporate thing. But I think that I think that certainly can happen, right? But I think that in the franchises we're talking about, I find it personally to be an endearing quality of the fact of Transformers. You know, it's like, because, I mean, as someone who likes collecting toys, there's definitely this whole element of like, when you go into stores and you're like, oh yeah, all this stuff is just this from that. Whereas now the Transformers are from the Transformers, but they started off, the Transformers were from the Transformers were from the toys, the Transformers. So do you guys like have that mentality where you think that it's like a sort of cheaper thing, or do you think it's just as valid? Or
I think it really depends on the quality of the thing. So
yeah,
I am not one of the people who looks down upon toys made from franchises, because as a kid, I like to play with like wrestling action figures. I like to play with like Batman action figures and everything. There's an inherent value to that. And like, in my opinion, if the toy is made well, it would stand up on its own without the backstory anyway. But like, the main reason I don't think that argument stands up is that literally everything that is a consumer product is made to sell the thing. Like,
but yeah,
I'd actually, yeah. So I agree with Jeff that it does have a bit of a dirty connotation, just because, and this might be sort of a holdover from our generation and the generation before, where like you get a toy to play with it and to realize like there's this greater corporate machination behind it. Does feel a little bit dirty. I think that kind of depends, though, because look at the Lego movie. Mm-hmm. Nobody looked at the Lego movie and was like, this is just a 2-hour advertisement. This will not stand. They were like, oh, no, that was pretty good. Let's go buy some more Legos. It did its job. I think the intention and the clarity of that intention is a big part of that. Because nobody's upset that people make Star Wars toys and that they make a ton of money off of Star Wars toys.
Right, but I wouldn't necessarily say that the motivation for writing Star Wars was to sell products.
That's kind of the point I wanted to get to, because I think that the two sides of it are the toy. Mm-hmm. What is the toy made for? Who's making the toy? What is the spirit behind that? And then the movie or the other piece of media. Because if you look at Star Wars was George Lucas's film project. He wanted to make a film. He wanted to tell a story. Yeah, and I think the dirtiness comes from people think that it might be a corruption on the intent for a commercial purpose, which is not always true. Yeah. And sometimes it is. It's not inherently bad, but I think it's when you feel like you're going against the spirit. Like, I wanted to make a great story about Batman. I wanted to make a visionary film.
Right.
But here's some action figures. Like, it's Spaceballs. Merchandising.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that... I don't know what I think. I had a thought, but it went away. Pat, did you have something you wanted to say?
My argument isn't that, like, everything that's ever made is made purely to make money, but like part of just our culture in general is everything that is popular has some inherent monetary value to it. It's always part of it. Like, yes, George Lucas didn't make Star Wars to sell toys, but he did make Star Wars to make a bunch of money off of something that he loved. Like,
yes,
right. Which I think that you can also say that about, like, starting off product first, right? Like, the people who are designing these products, maybe not the Americans, since it was stuff that was imported from already existing products, and there's always like a monetary element to it. But like, when it comes down to it, the people who's designing these things, like, they wouldn't be good if the people weren't trying to make things that they thought were cool, right?
Yeah.
So it's still like, when you're designing a project, it's still something that you're going to be passionate about, whether it be like a film project or a product project.
And that's why I think it mostly comes down to the quality of the thing that they put out. Like, if they're using the source material just to, like, make stupid figurines that don't actually do shit, like, in my opinion, the Funko Pops that are just purely for collectors, like, that's a money grab. But something that is just a good toy, like a Batman figurine that has a billion different functions and is actually, like, good quality, I think
even
that's
like
fine.
even look at model kits, particularly Gundam, and like the entire subculture that spawned off around that. Not just about like the anime or the manga or the stories behind it, but just the quality of building a Gundam model kit, the different grades, the different scales, and like how much goes into the toy is its own. The toys are their own draw in that case. And I think with Lego, it's very much the same, and with Transformer, it's very much the same. Even as a kid, like. Transformers is such a part of our culture. I never knew of a time without it, but the first Transformer I got was like a purple motorcycle, and I was vexed by that thing for months. Jeff, I can see you searching in memory banks like, what? Which one is he talking about?
I know
what toy
exactly
is this?
what you're talking about. Sideways from Armada. Did he come with two little mini cons that you could make one of them his head and it would make him a Decepticon, and the other one his head would make him an Autobot? And then the two mini-cons combined together, and they would form a motorcycle driver who would ride the motorcycle.
I can't tell if you know a lot about Transformers or you were hiding in my closet when I was 7.
Porque no los dos.
The thing that pissed me off about Transformers was I could never get them to go back together the way they're supposed to, particularly the Beast Wars ones, Jeff.
Oh, yeah. No,
is that why you hate Beast Wars, Pat?
Hard.
Is that your long-standing beef with Beast Wars?
Like, the cars I could figure out, like, I had this spaceship one when I was a kid, too, and those made sense the way they're supposed to go back together. Yeah. But for some fucking reason, I could never get Cheetor to go back to Cheetah.
Yeah, no.
So he just stayed in action figure form.
Cheetor is a little bit of a pain. No, a lot of the more organic forms in Beast Wars made them a little bit puzzly. Like, especially the ones from the Beast Wars Neo and Beast Wars the second lines from Japan. Like, a lot of those figures are like such a pain in the ass to get back into beast mode.
And this was before the time of YouTube, so I couldn't look up a video showing me how the fuck to do it. I just left them in that form.
I gotta pause. This guy's name is Cheetor?
Yes, this is my entire problem with Beast Wars.
Okay.
Well, when they turned into their animal forms, they did choose new names. So it's not like he was fucking named Cheetor before he became a fucking cheetah. In case you didn't know, he turned into a cheetah.
No, that's what I'm saying. I don't think it was some grand coincidence that they had some truck named Cheetor, and we're like, what if we made it a cat? I'm saying, like, how do you look at a cheetah and it's like, it's kind of like that Jim Gaffigan joke about slippers. Mm-hmm. It's like, what do you call these things that you slip on your feet? Slippers. It's kind of like that. What do you call this cheetah?
I absolutely love Beast Wars as a show. I think all of the writing is really fucking genius and clever. The names of the characters are the stupidest shit. It's like the main characters are like fucking. First of all, the main character, as a bad pun, is not Optimus Prime, but Optimus Primal, who turns into a fucking gorilla. There's Cheetor, Rhinox, Rat Trap, Dinobot, Megatron, which is just Megatron again, and then like Scorponok, Tarantulas. It's just like, I wonder what these guys are.
On this episode of Jess Lifts His Favorite Toys, List. I said lifts.
Lifts. He's lifting those toys. Why can't he hold all his toys?
I had a question. I actually had a question I wanted to ask both of you guys. Because I started the Lego episode, and I plan to watch the Star Trek episode.
It's a lot of fun.
Of Toys That Made Us. Jeff, if only because you told me about those Kirk and Spock police helmets. And like the next week after that, my friend sent me a picture of them.
That's great.
Just to make fun of me.
Spoiler alert, I'm using the Kirk and Spock police helmets as inspiration for Colin's new design and the new CGP artwork.
Oh, fuck. I'm actually really excited about that. So and now it's canon in the podcast, so it works.
Yeah.
So I guess what I wanted to ask is, a lot of the story of the Transformers episode was about how the need to have a story was really critical to pushing these products. How did that lens change for the other episodes, like for the Lego story? Because I'm just curious, like, we're talking about the importance and impact that these things have on franchises. Do you think that Transformers, based on these episodes of the show, is like a better example of toy franchises? Like, because like Lego obviously spun off to a bunch of different stuff.
Yeah,
but how does the history inform that?
I think that Lego was, I mean, I'll let Pat talk about this too, but from my take on it, I think that like Lego was in a position where, I mean, it had ups and downs, but it was largely doing well. And when it started to spawn off into other franchises like video games and movies, it seemed like those were at points where the franchise was a bit more comfortable. And it was like, oh, okay, we're successful. How are some ways that we could make more money? Whereas with Transformers and Lego, when it was Bionicle, it was a bit of a sort of necessity to keep it going, right? I mean, I don't know exactly how that timeline. I mean, Pat, you've more recently watched the Lego episode of the documentary than I have. Does that ring true, or is it?
It's kind of true in that the main line of Lego always did extremely well, especially with like boys.
Yeah.
But they tried their damnedest to figure out how the fuck to break in the girl market. It took them forever. They tried like 5 different things that ended up failing, and it cost a lot of money. And they finally started hiring women, and that's what like fucking helped them
Bionicles
figure
with
it out.
boobs.
No, they had to make the minifigure actually more realistic, and
yeah,
like
that always irritated me. The fact that the girl sets are like little like miniature Polly Pocket Barbie dolls.
it is. But at the time, that's what they wanted. Nowadays, it's more along the lines of like they have genderless kits that appeal to everybody. They still have princess sets and like
no, they've got a whole different aisles in the Lego stores that are
do.
just the like Lego fairies.
But they're really
called.
trying to push that like all the sets are for everybody, and that like most of the major sets are not gendered. They have like different women doing jobs that are in media stereotypically men, like computer programming and being a firefighter and like policeman and all that stuff. See, I just said policeman. It's policewoman now, police officer. Boom.
Yeah,
Inherent bias.
come on. Yeah.
But overall,
this is a good hot fuzz pull thing.
Yeah. Overall, I think that Lego had a lot of failures that, without the success of the past, it really made it like hard for them to push through them. They almost went bankrupt. I'm pretty sure they had to fire like
a couple
1,000.
times.
Yeah, they had to fire 1,000 members of their factory in Bilden, I think was what that place is called.
Well, I mean, I guess I was just saying, like, at least in the case of the Lego movie, right? Like, I think that there's, since we know this for a fact, since it's pretty recent, Lego was very successful before the Lego movie happened. And then the Lego movie was like a way to sell more things. But it was not like we need to do something to shake things up because our franchise is failing. It was like, this is a thing that everyone loves and is very successful. Now let's turn it into a movie because that will do great and it could be great. Right.
Nowadays, I think that's true. But like when video games were first coming out, they were extremely worried that they were not going to be able to keep up with that. Yeah. Especially because that was right around the time that their patent failed, or it didn't fail, but like expired too. So they were already fighting these other people taking their patent and making them cheaper. And then also the competing market in video games and TV and all that. So they were like, we got to make a TV series. We got to make a video game series. They were trying to branch out in these new categories. And the only one that really stuck was their robotics for the first like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. So, okay. Then to shift the focus a little bit more onto the media as opposed to the toys, like, do you think that I mean, this might be a tricky one for Pat, maybe a little bit. Do you think that the stories that were created for these franchises, and we can talk, and I want to hear you guys' opinion on Transformers for this too, do you think that they could have stood alone without the existence of the product, or like started off as their own thing and been successful enough to earn a product being given to them? Or do you think that they like relied upon the fact that the toys were what started the
this might
franchise?
Be speaking a bit from a point of ignorance, but there's been a pretty dramatic cultural shift in the Common Ignorance program. The cultural shift around toys over the years since Transformers debuted, well, it's very much like video games are kind of a more common household thing.
Yeah.
Like most American households, for example, have a game console, even if people don't play games on it. So the idea of just having like a physical toy, it's not dead. Toys still make a ton of money, but there's an increased emphasis on interactivity. Not just here's a blank canvas for you to play with.
Yeah.
But you can do whatever you want with it. So I think
like what that comment, I'll let you finish, but that comment of like, here's a blank canvas to play with, and then moving on from there, right? I think has also evolved in an interesting way, because nowadays it's really not. Like, I think that toys that were toys first is kind of a dying concept. I think that most of the toys out there on the market, and maybe it's coming back a little
they're
bit,
licensed,
but they're all from things, regardless of the fact if they're great
and
toys.
I mean, it's also why we've seen a resurgence in tabletop gaming and role and board games, and why those are becoming, again, bigger markets from the niches that they've been for kind of a while. And I think that nowadays...
Is that a legitimate way to pronounce that word? Niche?
Niche? Yeah,
Really?
yes it is. Niche and niche are they're both correct.
You're both correct.
Sorry, continue.
You're both correct. The most conciliatory and positive conversation we've ever had on this podcast. So when we look at how toys worked back in the 80s, that was kind of like the status quo for how you could entertain children. You couldn't put them in front of an iPad.
Right.
You put them in front of a TV. But, I mean, one, you didn't want to do that all the time. And two, if you didn't have a lot of TVs per household necessarily, you need something for the kid to do. I've been watching a lot of the Goldbergs recently, which is a TV show set in the 80s, and the main character, like, his whole focus is he has a Millennium Falcon, he has like a Skeletor playset, he has toys out the wazoo, because that's just what it was. That was how you engaged with your passions back then. And nowadays you engage with it a little differently, because we have social media, we have video games, like Pat said, to interact with. I just looked up Traveler's Tales list of developed games. They make the Lego video games. For like the last almost 20 years, they've only made Lego games, and they're a successful studio.
Yeah.
Because the form of engagement has changed. So to more succinctly answer your question, I don't think that you can really have a toy separate from a franchise now the same way you could back then, because we demand more from the interaction of our entertainment.
I think that, I mean, there are some examples of kind of a resurgence of toys just for toys' sake nowadays. But, like, then I want to ask something, right? Like, do you think that even nowadays, like, the Lego video games would work without the Legos attached
Not at
to
all.
them? I don't think so, right?
It's worth asking somebody who grew up with the games. Like, let's ask kids from the generation after us.
Yeah, I guess that's fair.
Who start with that, because we grew up with the Lego, so we can take that mentality and transfer it to the game. And we've experienced that same thing. Things from, like, Jeff, things from, like, the 80s, like Transformers, you have a different perspective as someone who was born after it than someone born before.
Right.
But to me, I just think that the fact that the video game relies so heavily on the art style and the simplicity of Lego to make it so that the game itself is easier to develop, that said studio, Traveler Studio, would not be able to make all of these video games for these various franchises as, like, unless they made them seriously in order to be accurate representations of the art styles and the feelings of those movies and stuff.
I think that's true from a development standpoint, because go ahead.
You can look at the Watchmen video game was a flop. The Pirates of the Caribbean video game, nobody really played it. The regular Harry Potter video games when they first came out were not popular whatsoever.
The Lego Harry Potter games are super
that's what I'm saying. Like, the regular Harry Potter ones sucked, but that also could have been a product of them coming out pretty early on and not a lot of people having computers.
Yeah, but I mean, like, there are also, like, plenty of very popular Star Wars video games that are not...
Star Wars video games, but those don't really emulate the movies. Those are their own franchises, like The Force Unleashed and things like that, Knights of the Old Republic.
Like a game that follows the story in the way that the Lego ones do would not be successful without Lego. Yeah.
For example, the Batman video games are the only one I can think of for a modern movie or like a modern superhero franchise. Series? Yeah, the Arkham series, which varies heavily from the movies that they are like paralleling. But if you look at the Deadpool video game, that didn't do very well either, and that's a pretty like analogous thing. It came out a couple years before the movie.
It's a bit of a dubious argument to make regarding the Lego games, because on one hand, yes, from a developmental standpoint, they need to be familiar with Lego. They need to incorporate that into the design of the game.
But it also helps them simplify the scope, is what I'm saying.
It does. And I think the core concepts of what Lego are lend themselves well to that medium. But I think you also just have the fact that they made a good video game, regardless of the Lego side of things. They knew how to translate that into a good game with simple mechanics. And the mechanics don't revolve around you knowing how Legos work. They revolve around you knowing how the game itself works.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's enhanced if you know that source material. But you could sit a 5-year-old in front of that and they'd figure it out, even if they never touched a Lego brick in their life.
Well, that's an interesting thing that Lego has created throughout the years, too, because, like, they've not only, like, because of these brick series, which go off of, like, a lot of different media, they not only, like, create these games that are very much their own thing, but they create kind of a feeling that's very much its own thing. Like, this sort of tongue-in-cheek, like, comedic elements that are used in the Lego games and the Lego movie is like they're very similar things, you know? Like it's
Traveler's Tales. They really hit a winning formula with that. My problem is they've been milking it. It's been more or less the same game ever since, with noticeable improvements.
Right, and because then they take these media franchises, which are in some cases a lot more serious, and then they're like, well, we can't really claim that this is the same level of serious as the real thing because everyone is made out of bricks, right? Yeah. So they're like, might as well play that up, right?
And they also tone down the violence and...
Yeah, I wonder then how much, like, the comedic tone of the Lego movie was derivative of the success of the games.
Ooh, yeah.
I don't. I think there's definitely a connection there. I might attribute it more to the fact that, like Pat was saying, from the history of Lego development, that Lego has always been geared toward kids with accessibility to adults.
Yeah.
And at that point, if you're making an animated movie, then that's it. I have a hard time saying that a lot of the tone and the style comes from the games, just because when the Lego movie came out, most of the Lego games didn't have dialogue, and the animation style of the Lego movie is so far and away its own thing, unique and beautiful and wonderful.
Yeah.
In a different way that the games are beautiful and wonderful.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I know that they already had certain franchises like Harry Potter and Batman and all of them. It seemed like they really heavily hit on in the movie the franchises that were made into video games.
Yeah.
I guess that's fair. The Lego Batman movie, which was a good movie. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
It's a really good movie, yeah. So okay, I wanna pull this towards a little bit back to Transformers, but also give you
I have some questions for you as well, Jeff. One question, but I'm excited to ask it.
I'm interested to see that, because I was gonna say that what I was gonna talk about is, I think, like, also a big part of the Transformers, like, story, quote unquote, is that, like, the story becomes malleable, but they reuse, like, character archetypes. And I think that that's another thing that is successful about Bionicle, is that, you know, they leave it so that the story can be whatever it has to be, but they've got, like, oh, there are these characters. You got your Optimus Primes, you got your Bumblebees, you got your Starscreams, your Megatrons, your Toa-Tahus, your Toa-Lewas.
Well, yeah, because the archetype for Bionicle was 6 heroes every year. Each one's a different color and a different element.
Right.
And I mean, for 2 years you had Tahu, and then you had Vakama, and then you had Joller, who was from the original thing. And it's just like, if you didn't care about the story, you could always say, I want the red one.
Right.
Like,
right.
It was that reductive, and I think that definitely helped with the accessibility.
I know, and for me, I think, like, I actually got a little bit disappointed, I think, when they started bringing back the old, like, the original 6 Toas.
Yeah, in like 2008 or 9.
Like, oh, okay, now we're just giving up on making new stories, and we're just rehashing the old ones. It felt a little like, which is nothing I've ever felt about Transformers. When they make new characters, I'm like, okay, yeah, I can get into those new characters, but I'm always looking for the old ones too.
What the issues that Bionicle was facing, a lot of it had to do with, you know, just marketplace shifts, but there was a core issue where the lore of Bionicle is very complicated. And you're talking to someone who for several years tried to follow the lore and then sort of fell off because it got too complicated, like almost indecipherable at points where, because you have so many elements, you have the broad good and evil stuff of the light and the dark, which is pretty common, but like the each elements and then the cultural things and which islands they live on. It really did get to be a lot to follow, and each mask and what each mask does and how does that vary with the Bow-Rock mask and the Rock-She slugs. I don't remember the specific names for them, but it's like it got to be too much. So I think they were trying to pull back around and refocus on the things that people connected with to get any sort of life out of it. Whereas Transformers, what I got from the toys that made us, when they made Beast Wars, was very much like, okay, we maybe overdid it. Let's just try something. Let's try something totally new. Right. And that's that is an extremely different direction, and it had more success. So I think there's valid criticism there, but they were trying to get back to what people connected with because they overdid it.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like, talking about the cultural part of Bionicle, because, like, I mean, as a kid, I don't think you even, like, totally get a sense of that. Like, I remember when I was a little kid, like, what a strange moment it was for me when I was playing with these toys and like, I was talking about their names, and my mother, who's an anthropology professor, was like, those words are Fijian. And I was like, what? Like, what are the fucking odds that these things that I'm playing with are...
There was, like, a lawsuit originally where they were, like, using too many names from... appropriated cultural stuff, and then they had to change. I know,
and it was all I was fucking thinking when I was watching Moana, and they're like the island of Matanui, and I'm just like, that's from the Bionicles. But then I'm like, no, it's not. It's a word.
Yep. Yeah.
It's like it means like what Matanui is island city, right?
I don't recall.
Great fucking movie.
Or is it New Island? I can't remember. But anyway, so Colin, you said you had some questions for me. I would like to briefly mention, we did not get any, but this would be about the time that I would be talking about the listener questions. So I think that this is a good place just to give that little pitch.
Yeah, if you do wanna put your stuff on the show, leave a question on the Facebook post. We try to make them before we record, and then we love talking about it. It spawns some fun discussions.
Yeah, no,
and it gives you a chance to pick your own episode topic, and that is also super fun.
Sure.
And you can also like and share the post.
You can smash that subscribe button.
We did not get any listener questions this week, so we can use that extra 5 minutes to have our own discussions. But
my roommate is here. Dominic, do you have any comments or questions about
Bionicle?
If this makes
or
Dominic
Legos,
win the fucking
Bionicle
or Transformers.
He says none that are appropriate for my show.
But what about the other two domains and shit?
Oh, Dominic, how do you feel about Transformers or Lego as a whole?
I mean, I love Legos, dude.
Boom.
Okay, he says he loves Lego, but I would like to point out that the plural of Lego is Lego.
I love Lego, dude. It's fucking awesome. Quote Dominic Penman.
The topic of this episode is Transformers, and I feel like Dominic's just really letting us down right now. But what
Jeff
else
feels
is new?
you're letting
Anyway.
us down.
For what?
I'm going to take that as a win for Lego. All right? Boom.
No. So, Jeff, the question I have for you is, I know that you feel some disconnect, at least animosity at worst, towards the Michael Bay Transformer film franchise.
Animosity at best.
Yeah, animosity at best. We'll see how the film Bumblebee treats you. But the thing that caught my eye, and I didn't really even think about, is those movies where obviously they were hoping to push Transformers toys. Yeah. And the movies saw a big redesign of these characters because the aesthetic is much more like organic and fluid and rounded. And I want to ask, do you have opinions on the toys based on the movies?
They are up and down. I think that the toys from the first movie were very good as a whole.
What made them good? Like, what did you like about them?
Well, I mean, I think that, okay, I guess to talk about what made those good, I'm going to talk a bit more about what made some of the later ones not good, if that makes any sense. There are certain elements that things got a bit cheaper as the franchise went on. They started doing things that really irritate me personally, which don't seem to bother a lot of everyone else in the Transformers community, but they would do this thing called cheating, where like there would be...
Is that where you can like disconnect parts and move them?
No, that is referred to as parts forming, but no,
okay.
Not that. Cheating is when, so say, Optimus Prime, his chest is the windows of a truck, right?
Yes.
So for example, in the first movie, that's the windows of the truck were his chest.
In the later ones, it was like armor. It was weird.
In some of the later, not even the movie designs, but when he was still windows of a truck were his chest, the windows of the vehicle mode of the toy would not actually become the chest, but there would be a fake chest somewhere in the figure that looked like the windows of a cab. And that is something that has always fucking bothered me.
Yeah, that seems more dishonest than like the licensing stuff we were talking about a little while ago.
He's supposed to have a couple wheels on his legs, but they didn't engineer it in a way so the wheels would end up on his legs, but they would have
Does
fake
he have
wheels.
just two big rubber eyes?
So that to me became like, that's why I appreciate the whole toy first story later element, because they were designing the characters based off of the toys instead of trying to make toys that fit the designs of the characters, which I think in some cases ends up being a little bit detrimental to the figures.
I think that speaks to what I was saying before. I think the intent is a huge part of it. Like where the idea starts and where it's emanating from is really going to impact how you feel about it. But no, I was curious about that because I don't even think I've gotten my hands on a Transformers toy post 2007.
Yeah, no, I think that the 2007 toys were pretty good. Yeah, I mean, there's been good and bad ones in every franchise. I think that like they did some really innovative things with the toys of the third movie, but it felt like there was kind of a quality drop. But I think some of that had to do with the economy at the time. They are fun toys. At the end of the day, I don't usually like to buy them because they're not the designs of the characters that I like personally.
That's fair.
Yeah. Like, I hate the whole fucking, like, Bumblebee with his, like, mouth, like, weird mouth thing and the fact that he can't speak, because that was never a thing. They just made that shit up. Like,
well, maybe the upcoming Bumblebee film will have an interesting backstory to that.
Yeah, so the Bumblebee film I'm actually quite excited for, mainly because it's being directed by Travis Knight, who is the head runner of Laika Studios, which is, like, a popular stop-motion studios. They did like Kubo and the Two Strings and Coraline, I believe, I haven't seen Kubo, but I've heard that's a fantastic movie. I know Coraline's a fantastic movie, so I'm excited for that. And there was a real eating
grin right now.
There was a real fucking wild moment when I was watching a trailer for this movie, because before, like, they're using the Bumblebee design from the Bay movies, right? And then they dropped one trailer that just, it has like Soundwave in the movies is like just a mess of parts, right? He doesn't look anything like Soundwave. There's a moment in the trailer
satellite in
where
the second
there's a moment in the trailer for the Bumblebee movies where just like boom, all of a sudden there is G1 Optimus Prime, G1 Soundwave, G1 Shockwave looking exactly how they fucking should. Like, just realistic renditions of these characters, like, straight out of the cartoons. Even some of the characters that were in the movies and don't look like that in the movies. And it was just like, I was watching this trailer and I was like, what the fuck? Like, I did not think that was going to happen. And it made me really excited for it, honestly.
So that brings us to the end of the discussion. I hope you enjoyed this hour-long ad for Bumblebee in theaters this December.
It was not listen, we just got into Bumblebee in the last, but yes,
but we gave the audience the context to know why we should love this film.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, but either way, you are right. We should be moving on to the rating section, my fangirling aside.
I did not mean that passive-aggressively. No. I just wanted to make the joke about the ad.
Regardless, we are over time. So, but do either of you have any closing thoughts on the toy to media franchise concept, or no? What do you want? Hit me up, or don't.
I don't think I've been satisfied with Star Trek toys.
You should fucking watch the shit out of that episode, because it's very amusing. It's talking about how, like, all the Star Trek toys were just like other toys that had nothing to do with Star Trek being licensed as Star Trek products, and it's just people.
One cool thing I have to tie all of this together is my dad was great with Lego, and he built a Star Trek The Next Generation era tricorder out of Lego. Actual size, opens and closes with a clamshell, fake buttons and lights on the inside.
That's impressive.
I still have it on my piano today. It's very good.
Which
And
is
that
evidence
is-
as to why Lego are the greatest toys in the world.
Do 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 do. That's the transition.
Yeah, Pat cut out for me. I missed what you just said.
Oh, Pat said it's Lego's the greatest toy in the world, and then I sang the transition.
Oh, okay. Well, then let's transition off of your transition. Let's move on to the rating sections, boys. Guys, thank you both for a enjoyable discussion. I had a lot of fun.
I was hoping you were going to say an interlocking discussion.
Interlocking discussion. A transformative discussion.
There you go. That brought it home.
What did Pat say? What did Pat say?
I don't know. Pat, what did you say?
Said stackable.
Oh. Well, we're talking about Transformers, so thank you both for a transformative discussion. Now we are moving on to the ratings section of this podcast, where each of our representatives are going to rate the topic on a scale from 1 to 5 steps of transformation.
What?
Like, it takes you how many steps does if it takes 1, that's kind of lame. If it takes 5, that's better, but still kind of lame.
Wait. Is this going to be like... Does this determine how long the
exactly
sound is?
I love that part of the episode in the show. So
yeah,
okay.
When everybody...
To clarify for the listeners, though we were talking about the Transformers as a franchise, I am going to have them rate the episode of The Toys That Made Us, just because,
That's what we watched.
Yeah, that's what they watched. They don't have a full concept of the franchise as a whole, all of its ups and downs. So that is, we're going to be talking about Season 2, Episode 2 of The Toys That Made Us.
I would like to quickly say that one of the best parts about the Lego episode of The Toys That Made Us was they kept talking about the system of Legos.
Yeah.
But they had one dude, like every time they would say the system, they just cut back to him saying it. And it was the funniest fucking thing ever.
No, they did a lot of that in the fucking Transformers episode too. Of just like, going back. I love the point when they're saying like, oh, and the sound, and they just like have 3 different people making their shitty impressions of choop 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 choop.
Yep.
All right, Pat, how did you feel about this episode of The Toys That Made Us and Transformers as you saw it through this lens?
So I guess I also suffered from what ailed Colin in that I thought that it was pretty much just someone reading a Wikipedia article to me, which is interesting. Like, I definitely enjoy reading articles about that stuff, but I wish there was a little bit more like investigative stuff behind it. So while I recognize that the everyday person probably likes it better in the format that it is, I am going to give it 3 out of 5 steps of transformation so it can match my shitty fucking Cheetor toy.
There was a great line of Beast Wars toys where they were called flip-formers, where they were spring-loaded and they would be in their animal form, then you just flip up the tail and then the whole robot would just spring out. And so it was just 1 step.
But Cheetor was not that fucking person.
No,
right?
Cheetor was not. I've got a Cheetor toy, and yeah, he's a little bit of a lumpy-looking tiger or cheater. It's not Tigtor. He's
Cheetor the tiger.
Anyway, Colin, how do you feel?
I'm also of a split mind for the reasons I stated before. Generally, I didn't super enjoy the presentation of it. I found that it's sort of sarcastic, sardonic, I guess is a better word, tone. It's a reverent tone. I found it off-putting for something that's informational, especially because they were at the beginning. They were like, "It became Transformers." Wait, nope, not yet. And then they say, and then there was Diaclone, and it became Transformers. Nope, not yet. And it just kept looping through to the point where, at first coming in, I'm like, "Oh, this is an interesting, ironic take." But then I realized it's just kind of the same tone throughout.
Yeah, it takes a little bit of an obnoxious tone, I think, by person.
It does. I think it kind of feels like I'm listening to Cookie Masterson from the Jackbox Party Pack games the whole time.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah, I feel it too.
I wish they got like Mike Rowe instead. That would have been great.
Yeah, so I think all of my issues are with the presentation. But that said, I really enjoyed the information that was presented to me. I wish it was more in depth. But I came away from it net positive because it tackled an interesting subject matter in a fairly comprehensive way. And For that, I'm going to give it 3.5 out of 5.
All right.
Fucking bitch.
Oh,
You just had to give it more than I did.
Well, you're just nervous because you and I are like neck and neck for gold
Yeah.
stars.
I don't give a fuck about
So
that.
yeah, next we are giving the Gold Star Student Award. Gosh, this is not feeling good to me because I don't know who to give it to. But
What is the award going to be?
The person who I think did the best in this episode, kind of talking in depth about what we're talking about, and the reward is going to be, God, that's a
The
good
golden
question.
Dianetics mission.
I mean, doesn't it kind of have to be like the golden Autobot symbol or something? Doesn't it? Does it?
No, I think a golden plaque saying you failed me for the last time, Starscream, maybe.
Fucking Leonard Nimoy. Oh, fun fact. I meant to bring this up earlier, but when we were talking about like how like toy franchises can seem to like cheapen media, the last role that Orson Welles ever played was the role of Unicron in the Transformers 1986 movie.
Oh shit.
That was the last role he ever played before he died, and his opinion on it was just like, I'm just a toy that's fighting other toys, and this is stupid.
I'm just a dude playing a dude.
Well, how do you think
disguised
Ricardo
as another
Montalban
dude.
felt? Famed actor of stage and screen, his last role was a cow on Family Guy.
That's pretty funny.
That is pretty
I like
funny.
that. But
So,
I
gosh.
think that you should do a 1 to 5 iPads continuously looping a YouTube clip of Optimus Prime saying, "I died for your sins." I like that.
We're on to the gold star
Boom.
now, not the rated
Oh yeah, never mind. Give me a golden one of those.
golden. No. I kind of want to do the Matrix of Leadership, but we didn't really say anything about that.
How do you like make a physical embodiment of the Matrix of Leadership?
The Matrix
You
of
put it in a
Leadership
cube
is
and you push
a
it in his
thing
chest.
in the Transformers cartoon that Optimus Prime has in his chest, and it's like passed down from Autobot leader to Autobot leader.
Interesting.
And I'll show you what it looks like, because that's going to be
Can
the
it be
fucking gold
golden?
star. Yeah, it actually is. It's like a blue crystal with like a gold shell and like a anyway. Well, you'll see it on the gold star because that's where we're going. We're gonna go with the golden Matrix of Leadership. And this is fucking really tough for me. So tough to the point that I'm just gonna continue this sentence without having made a decision yet. Colin, I really liked your take on a lot of the different historical elements of, like, you know, how the shows fit into the context of the world around them. Pat, I definitely applaud you for fucking watching another episode of this show to do your research on Legos, and I think that
Boom.
you got a lot of good insight out of that. And
I'm like actually nervous right now. Why am I nervous?
I am too. This is
are
very
you feeling
difficult
this?
for me.
I mean, a little bit.
Like, I'm eyes wide palm spaghetti right now. Hot damn.
I'm not spaghetti level nervous, but I could feel a little bit.
Gosh, I think I'm gonna go with Pat. We're gonna go with Pat.
Is it just because you don't want me on top anymore?
No,
Jeff,
it is
you can look me in the
absolutely not.
eyes when you
It is
say that.
absolutely not because of that. I have factored that into my decision on previous episodes, but not this one. No, you guys, you both did a really fucking good job. But
This was a fun conversation.
this was a really fun conversation, and there were points when I think that Pat got a little bit absent, and I think that there were points when Colin got a little absent, and that just happens in every episode.
Yeah, I don't really know shit about Bionicles.
But I think that, like, Pat brought a lot of really interesting insights about, like, the sort of economic ups and downs of Lego and the motivations of the company, which obviously factored into Colin's domain as well, given that it was from Lego. But
Yeah.
Pat just had a little bit more of that inside information, so I appreciated that. But do not take this lightly, that was a difficult ass decision.
I was really hoping that asking you questions about Transformers would push me over the edge.
God, I didn't mind it this episode, Colin, but I gotta tell you, every time you backseat host, that does not put you in good favor for me.
That wasn't backseat hosting. I had a question for you.
No, I know.
That was not that.
No, which is why I said in this episode that did not mean anything. I thought that those questions were good, and I applaud you for those. But this is something that I've been thinking about for a little while, but I think this is the perfect episode to do it. We've been looking for some new ways to engage with our audience. I want to hear from you guys on Twitter, because sometimes we do these episodes, we record them, and then in post, it just like, I listen to the episodes and I'm like, I picked the wrong person. And maybe that's the case this time. I want to hear, do you think that Pat won this episode, or do you think that Colin won this episode?
That could be
Why
fun.
don't you believe in me?
I do believe in you, but I want to know what other people's takes are on it. I want to hear if they think that you were rightful.
Dude, you're gonna start like a Twitter war. We're gonna have Team Colin and Team Pat between all 8 of our listeners.
Good. I want to start a Twitter war.
Well, the thing is, yeah, you can chat with us on Twitter, but I'll find a way to put these in the Facebook. We can incorporate that idea into the Facebook post too. That'd be a fun.
That's just gonna make me feel
I
shitty
wanna
if
hear,
people don't actually
do you think I made the
won.
right call? Do you think that Patrick Brem deserved this award, or do you think that Colin should get it? That's not going to change anything. Pat will alwa
Yeah,
always have this golden matrix of leadership, but
but it won't feel like I earned it.
Yeah, well, you know. You earned it in my eyes.
Except later on, you're gonna listen to the episode and be like, nah, Colin deserved it.
I didn't say that would be for sure the case. I just said that sometimes that's the case, alright?
Whatever. Now my throne feels like a lie.
I'm sorry. Maybe it'll be extra validated by all the listeners that are like, no, you're totally right. Colin was a fuck in this episode.
That's how I feel in most episodes, but...
So that's where I'm going to leave it.
Can we end it now?
Hear,
I need to go cry.
That's what I'm going to do. I want to hear from you guys. I think that both of my representatives did a very good job this episode, and I had a really fun time. So I think that's going to just about wrap it up. Thank you again for listening to the Comic Geeking program. I am your host, Jeff Leavitt, and you can find me primarily on Instagram. I've got an Instagram called Things I Wish Existed, and there's
an Instagram.
There's a dot between each word. I have a website that's linked on my Instagram. I've got a YouTube channel just under Jeff Leavitt. That kind of shit. You know, it all exists. I don't do a lot on any of them, to be totally honest. But if you want to see what kind of stuff I do in my life, that's where you'll get a snippet of it. I have been joined again by Pat and Colin. You guys have any places you want to pimp out? Pat, you go first. Colin afterwards. As process of elimination states.
You can find me on Twitter at Purifery. I mostly tweet about hockey, but you know, it's pretty fun.
What about Patty Ice Official? What's that on?
You can do Patty Ice Official. That's Instagram. I wish I could get Patty Ice Official on Twitter, but Twitter doesn't let you change your handle.
Pat.
What?
I was playing Fallout 76 and I found someone, it was spelled differently, but their gamer tag was Purifery, just spelled a little different from yours.
Oh, that's cool.
And he was great. I played Fallout with him for a while and he had a fireman's outfit. And I'm like, oh, you're prepped to help California. And he's like, I live in California. I'm like, good luck, dude. So that was fun. My name's Colin. You can find me on Twitter at SonicColinK, as well as Facebook, Xbox, SoundCloud, a few other places.
All right.
Do you not
Lovely.
have an Instagram?
I do not have an Instagram, no.
You should get an Instagram.
How many people just want to see pictures of my cat? I need to make a cat.
A lot of people.
No, here's the thing.
I
I'd have to make an Instagram for my cat. Like, I have enough trouble, like, repping myself on social media. That's a lot.
All right. Well, next week we do have an episode, and it is going to be hosted by Colin. Colin, what's next week's episode going to be about? I actually legitimately don't know.
Our book club is actually going to be a book club. We will be discussing...
Are you talking about a fucking book?
We will be talking about the first of 3 volumes in John Hodgman's Almanac of Complete World Knowledge, the areas of my expertise. If you want to hear us read a list of 700 hobo names, tune in next week. We're not going to read it. You can find it on YouTube, but it's a very funny book full of fake trivia, and we're going to be talking about sort of absurdist humor.
Oh, okay. Like the episode on rubber.
Not so much, more... I'm going to be focusing a little more on the writing side because it is a book than it is the presentation
Yeah,
side.
I hope you don't focus too much on the same things because Chowder and Laura were in the rubber episode.
That's true. No, that's very true. What we're doing, though, is I'm actually not having them read the whole book. Mm-hmm. I'm assigning them specific sections, and then they each get to pick a different section to bring. So all of us are talking about the same book, like a real book club, but they're each going to bring things, because each section is so disparate that I want to get their different takes on it.
That sounds fun. All right. Make sure to tune in for that next Friday on the 14th of December. And follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Geeking Program. Any engagement, such as sharing a post, tagging us, or tweeting #CGP, super helpful to us, first of all. And second of all, it gives you a chance to be entered. Well, it doesn't. You will be entered into a raffle where you get the chance to pick the topic for a future episode. We've had some fun ones. And we had that one on Dota too. I'm just kidding. It was a fun episode, even though we didn't like the game. Reviewing us on Apple Podcasts is super, super fucking helpful to helping us grow our show and get out there into the interweb verse. And we'll read any new reviews that we have in the air. Do we have any? I don't know.
Nope.
All right. Well, that's that. Anyway, thank you for listening,
out,
subscribing, sharing, fucking legitimizing my obsession with plastic playthings, everything.
Tell me more.
And we're gonna talk to you next week. It doesn't have to be a sex thing. This episode of the Common Geeking Program was hosted by yours truly, Jeff Leavitt, joined by the representatives Patrick Brem and Colin Ketchen. This episode is sponsored by Paramount Studios, except really, really super not at all. That's a lie. The podcast is created and produced by Colin Ketchen and Jeff Leavitt, with this episode edited by me, Jeff, as well as Matt Canaman and Taimul Chaudhary, and featuring original music by Colin Ketchen. Next week, we'll be talking about The Areas of My Expertise by John Hodgman, so be sure to tune in for that on Friday, December 14th. And as always, thank you for listening to this.
So, hi, my name is Colin. I was voluntold to represent the fantastic toy line produced by Lego, Bionicle.
Yeah, but I was told to represent Bionicle. You said it so robotic the second time.
I said it so naturally that I think you could put it anywhere in the episode and you wouldn't notice.